Hello everyone and welcome to SUPERHOG's Titans podcast series, the show for anyone who wants to get into the world of vacation rental. Today I'm delighted to be joined by the man who needs no introduction, the world famous Matt Landau. Matt, how are you?
I'm great.
Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today from Miami. How is everything in Miami?
Beautiful, beautiful. I just went for an ocean swim. Had a little coffee, and actually, Leo, you'll appreciate this. I was walking back, and a gentleman who was also bald was approaching me, and he started smiling, and he motioned to his head, and he said, "What's up, brother?" I was like, "Hi," and he walked past, and I was like, "Wow, that was just bald code. I've never experienced that." But he was like, "I'm his brother."
I do not more than appreciate that. I love that. And I guess that means that we have to start doing it now, right?
Yeah. It's like the way that like people who drive like fancy cars, they'll wave to one another. We
With friends of mine, we often describe it as the club that you can never ask to join, but unfortunately you can never leave.
Yeah, it's like a support group.
Absolutely. And Matt, you've obviously, like me, come off the back of many weeks of travel for these industry conferences. It's such a busy time of year, and it's fair to say the industry is absolutely booming at the moment. What have you been experiencing?
Record numbers of attendees at conferences, which I think is a simple but huge indicative litmus test of how the industry is growing. Because after all, the people who attend the conferences are only a small sliver of the actual market size. But if you are demonstrating commitment and interest by paying to travel somewhere, paying your own hard-earned money to attend an event, you're serious and you want to improve. And I think the number of people attending these events is directly correspondent with our evolution.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? Now, clearly you have a long history in this industry. You had a property management company originally. When you were managing property day to day and really in the grind, did you find time to go to these events, or did they just seem like a world away?
I remember the day so clearly. I had the chance to meet the owner of a huge supermarket chain throughout Central America. And I was sitting by the pool with him, and I asked him, what was the moment that your business went from just one pharmacy here in the city to thousands throughout the region? And he said one thing. He said, I started going to conferences in the United States where there were people doing this for far longer and far more professionally than I was, and I just copied what they were doing. He said that first conference I ever went to changed my entire purview of possibilities. And when he said that, I was like, damn, I need to go to a conference. And I went to a conference. I went to Heather Bayer's conference there in Toronto. It was like pretty much the first conference I attended.
That's amazing. And again, it makes complete sense to me. I think there's such a wealth of experience in our industry. And in my experience, and you're a really good example of this, people are really happy to share what they've learned along the way and really kind of help people point themselves in the right direction to either grow, improve their guest experience, whatever they're trying to get out of it. Can you tell us a little bit about your story, your vacation rental story, how you got to where you are today, and what you're loving about your day-to-day work at the moment?
Yeah, my business is a little bit unique. So I sometimes it helps to walk people through the evolution of it. Started off managing properties, no experience, no training in hospitality. Did everything. I learned every lesson the wrong way, the hard way, and ended up documenting what was working from a marketing perspective and what wasn't in generating bookings. This is, mind you, before the days of Airbnb. So this was an old school kind of nurture marketing best practices guide of how to find guests who would love your vacation rentals and get them to come back and refer friends. I started selling those best practices, those tips in the form of an ebook online. This is while still managing my properties, and nothing else existed online. There were no gurus, there were no ebooks, no courses, and I benefited from that. because I was presenting something focused and new. And I saw that there was money to be made on the educational side of the spectrum. So fast forward a couple years later, I sold my vacation rental business. I was burned out, which is also one of the big topics that we discuss in my work today, how to avoid burning out, how to ride the wave as long as possible. But started focusing exclusively on the educational side of the industry. That looked like creating more educational materials and eventually creating a community, a private community in which people could come get those structured learning materials, but also interact with one another. And that was the impetus for VRMB Communities, which is to date the longest running paid community online for vacation rental professionals. And we have over 1,000 members who are actively helping one another through challenges that have been solved before. And the community is kind of the core of my life. I'm inside of that forum pretty much every day, all day, curating, pointing people in the right direction, reminding folks that there's no stupid question. In fact, it's probably a great question and we probably have the answer to it. From this core community, we started telling the stories of our best members. And this took the form of podcasts at first. We have a podcast that's called Unlocked, which is like a fly on the wall with me and this leading operator. And then it also evolved into TV shows and film, where we now tell and show the stories of these great members, but in engaging ways and entertaining ways that we think resonate more with people who are looking to learn than just an old ebook.
Thank you for explaining it in those terms. Fantastic. I mean, what a great journey you've had. And I love what you do, because I think that every day is a school day, right? And we'll talk about burnout a bit later, because this is definitely a topic I want to go into as well. But every day is a school day. And that's what I love about this industry, is there's so many people just up for trying it, growing, learning along the way. And what I think you offer with your community is something that's genuine and long lasting, right? It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's a how to build a lasting business that has legacy.
Yeah, and it's the two sides of the knife, right? One side is it's so easy to get started in this industry. Anyone can do it. The flip side is that anyone can do it. And there's a lot of people who are attracted for the wrong reasons. And there's a lot of experts who prey on those people. And so we just try to distinguish ourselves from that and remind folks that this is a hospitality business and the results are not going to happen overnight. They're going to come from a mindset and habits and starting to build things the right way.
Well, that's great. And let's dig into some of that, because I think that's so important. What would your advice be to somebody who has started on their vacation rental journey? They've started to build a business, they've acquired some properties, and they're looking to scale and grow.
Well, the beginnings of a business is fun because you're super excited and enthusiastic. You don't even know what the hell you're doing. You're just there at the laptop at 6 a.m. I would say two things. We've now been helping individuals through their growth journey on a one-on-one basis, but also in a group setting now for about 7 years. And there's two core things, sort of patterns, that sit beneath the surface of those who are able to grow effectively. The first is having a plan. Almost everybody got in this industry accidentally, at least folks up until about now. People are starting to be a little bit more deliberate, a little more intentional. They're starting to come in with business backgrounds. They're starting to use business techniques applied to this space. But on average, most people who grew their vacation rental management companies did not know what they were doing and therefore did not have any plan. And when you don't have a plan, you just take any opportunity that comes. You ride the enthusiasm, the passion, but you also sometimes get sort of stuck way out to sea upon realizing you never really had a compass or a map to begin with. So we've developed these kinds of maps and compasses within the community. We also have an accelerator program that walks people through this process on a one-on-one basis. So having a plan, whether it's a business plan that can use a whole lot of improving, or one that you swiped from a friend, having a plan is huge. You can iterate it regularly, but you suddenly kind of have some framework within which to operate. The second thing is the opposite of having a plan. It's just diving in and actually doing a lot of the work yourself. Learning how to unclog toilets and fix air conditioning and show up and help guests in the middle of the night sucks. But once you understand how to do it and how bad it sucks, you can better create a standard, create a procedure, hire somebody to do it, ensure that they're doing a good job, ensure they have all the resources they need to do the good job. And no longer is your business entirely sitting on your shoulders. You've built a team to grow with. But you don't get to that point of learning, at least in our experience, from reading a textbook. You need to get out into the world. You need to start meeting guests. You need to start meeting homeowners. You need to listen. You need to take notes. You need to feel what a great vacation rental hospitality experience looks like, and probably the opposite. You need to feel what the failures look like too, in order to then begin to scale. And I believe if you don't have those two things, an intimate understanding of the pieces and a plan, I don't think you can scale effectively.
I think that's fantastic advice. I heard it said that by another professional in our industry that you really should every day be trying to work yourself out of a job, right? So all the things that someone else can do for you, you should have someone else do, which is essentially what you're saying there. And then I guess that allows you then, with that extra headspace and that extra time, to get back to your plan, right? So, once you've learned how to do the jobs, you can then focus on improving the business and doing more of the strategy. But that process of doing every job in itself, that takes a long time. There's a really big, long learning curve you need to go on before you can do that, right?
Yeah, and no two entrepreneurs in this space are the same. No two destinations are the same. So you end up kind of having to cobble together your own definition of hospitality. And there's no way that you can do that without actually experiencing it yourself. Yeah,
very true. You started your vacation rental career before Airbnb, probably, really mostly online, I'd imagine, although correct me if I'm wrong, mostly online. But still, you've seen the experience change from being one more about a real human-to-human connection and doing business to a more online way of working. What mistakes do you see newer property managers making?
Yeah, this is a combination of knowing it's wrong because I went through it myself, but also starting to see it happen more and more these days. And it is losing sight of the core hospitality gestures, which a lot of times are human. They're not scalable. They're not automatable. You might be able to enhance some of them with technology, but these are the core things that actually make us feel. Overlooking that core. And most of that takes place in the home, right? We're kind of blessed in that the product that we're selling requires people to come into our physical spaces. It's a very intimate thing today. It's not Amazon dropping off a package at your front door or some autonomous vehicle dropping you off. These are people coming into our homes, having meaningful life experiences with one another. So losing sight of that core, the fact that this is our chance to really step in and shine, I think is the biggest mistake. And I see it being made with the largest vacation rental management companies in the world. And I see it being made, and this part really is tough for me to swallow, with the small companies who are far better equipped to inject these elements of hospitality. But for whatever reason, or based on whatever advice they've been giving, are trying to automate everything. So I think keeping sight of that core as the single most valuable resource in our industry right now. If you've got it, you get to basically write your own story. If you don't have it, no matter how unique you pretend to be, a larger corporation will probably do it more efficiently than you.
I completely agree with everything you've said there, and I love the way you've articulated it much more sort of eloquently than I would have done. But I think that you're right. The mistake is being made both small and large, and it's baffling with the small providers because surely that's where that really handheld personal touch can be most felt. I think that one area that vacation rental has over hotels, and I say this a lot, I guess I repeat myself here, one area that vacation rental has over hotels, without a shadow of a doubt, is this idea that it can be hyper local and personal. So it's, you know, it's not every vacation rental experience in a tiny small town can have that real authentic local feel, the same way that a hotel can just never compete with that. Sure, hotels are great and they serve another purpose and a different purpose, but you know, I love speaking to local providers in, you know, rural UK, rural US, that, you know, in the French Alps, the outback in Australia, because their vacation rental story is so much more interesting than the chain hotel that also sits in their town. And you're right, people aren't telling that story and putting it in front of their guest enough. And if they did, their guest would more likely go home and tell their friend, hey, you've got to go and stay in this particular town because I had the most amazing experience.
Yeah, if you're passionate about it, this is, again, a big if, because if folks are listening to this and they're not passionate about the hospitality at all, this thing's going to drive them nuts. They're going to lose all their hair. If you're passionate about it, you have a path towards a limited edition moat, a one-of-a-kind brand that is irreplicable, inimitable by even the biggest, most experienced experts, richest companies in the world cannot compete with a one-of-a-kind brand. However, if you don't have that core hospitality DNA and you're not passionate about it, I promise you, you will get replaced on your terms or otherwise by some of these bigger companies who can do it much more cost effectively.
Really, really interesting. Now, the first thing that any property manager or host should do if they're starting a vacation rental business is clearly join VRMB, right? Join your community. But what's the second thing they should do?
I've always believed you need to equip yourself with good information. So removing my own personal hat for the moment, you need to get into spaces online where the best people are collaborating, the best people are sharing best practices. You need those people to be trusted. You don't want to just go follow anybody. And reaching out to people and asking, what should I do? Chances are they've already done that challenge before. They've crossed that bridge. Finding a mentor type in the industry who has got a business that you admire, that you'd like to achieve several years down the road, let's say, is a great way to get ahead, because then you can kind of bounce questions off that person. You go and visit their operation, stay there, see what it's like to run a successful vacation rental management company. I think it's all about the people, and it's all about surrounding yourself with the people who have done it before you. I think anything else is kind of ignorant in a way.
Again, I think that's absolutely fantastic advice. Matt, you talked at the start here of the podcast about burnout. Mental health is a really, really important topic of conversation. One that I think we've only really started to have out in the open maybe for the last 2 years, 3 years, which is great that we're able to have it now that we are having it. What advice would you give to that potentially hardworking, someone who is very hospitality minded, very, very workaholic focused? How would you help them not fall into some of those traps of burning out? Because if it's your own business, it is very hard to take a day off.
Yeah, it's different. So if it's your own business, that's one thing. If you're an employee of someone's business, I would say be very clear about your roles and responsibilities. Draw clear boundaries. Don't let your employers overstep them. Communicate well and be ready to move on if somebody is not respecting those boundaries. That's a toxic relationship. Same goes for, by the way, these Airbnb super hosts who consider themselves to have like the most amazing businesses, and yet they hate Airbnb for doing XYZ. That's a toxic relationship that they're in because they've allowed Airbnb to overstep boundaries that didn't exist before. But that's a separate podcast. If you're running your own business to avoid burnout, you definitely want to figure out how to delegate and how to hire employees that would do what you do when you're not there. And oftentimes people cross their fingers that, oh, I hope I made the right hire. I hope that person will channel my inner juju. You cannot leave this up to chance. This boils down to creating your company values, creating principles that operationalize those company values so that you can hire based on what you stand for and what your potential employee would do in your position if they're the only one there. And I cannot think of a success story that does not include burnout without those steps, because otherwise, no matter how passionate you are, you're the fail point. The entire business is built on your shoulders. And the moment you try to take a step away without any planning, it's like pulling the leg out from underneath the stool. So really be clear on a plan. Trust in others. Trust in your ability to create standards and operating procedures so that other people can follow how it should be done. And repeat over and over and over again those values and those principles so that your team, when you're not there, because you need to start taking some more vacations, will channel your brand. I think that's the key to unlocking the potential of this space.
That's great advice. And of course, when they're taking those holidays, that's when actually, I'm sure some of the best ideas come. You know, when you've taken yourself out of your environment, you've sat on the beach having a mimosa, suddenly you think, oh, why don't I do that? It's so true. Changing your headspace, altering how you think about things is going to help you, which is why you've been taking small breaks in the day. You mentioned having a sea swim this morning. I'm sure on some of those sea swims you come up with great ideas, and that's really, really important to remember. Headspace. Do you you're a hardworking chap. You do really, really amazing stuff. If anyone hasn't seen one of Matt's podcasts or videos, shows, you really should. But you're a hardworking guy, Matt. How do you switch off? What do you do to get headspace from yourself and your own busy brain?
I love time to myself. I love running. Sometimes I'll listen to music or podcasts. Other times force myself to deal with myself and all of that discomfort. I love going for bike rides. I love sitting on the beach. I love traveling by myself as well. I just like space to myself to observe and to think. Letting questions and ideas breathe is so valuable to me. And it's hard. If you're inside a demanding job, you're typically reacting to whatever happens. But when you can incorporate some of that free, innovative brainstorming time, you start to make big leaps. So I have really tried to engineer more free time of doing nothing into my schedule so that I can focus on those big leaps as opposed to always trying to respond. So I also just love traveling and meeting all of our colleagues. They're all basically my heroes.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? A really good point about being by yourself and taking time to think. And then also this really nice conference scene that we all get to go on and meet people and share ideas. I see it as like I read a book, I can't quite remember who, by maybe it's Malcolm Gladwell, talking about how the Silicon Valley effect of them all meeting in coffee shops and sharing ideas with one another was really powerful for like pushing these businesses on to the next level. And I think the conference scene in the vacation rental sector is the same. It's like a caravan effect of that. So you all come together, you talk about the learnings you've had from the last quarter, you have a few drinks, which alters your mind, and then the ideas start flowing. Or you indeed, as I do, get up at 6 a.m. and go jogging with someone and connect and bond and do all that sort of stuff. And I agree. I find that very, very rewarding.
It's a support group. It's like where we first started this conversation.
Well, Matt, look, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. There was other things I wanted to speak to you about, but we'll have to get you on for a part 2 because, again, you're such you're across so many different projects that we need to come and have more conversations. Let me finish with this though. It's going back a little bit into the detail of what we're talking about, but I want to do that deliberately. You've started your vacation rental business. You have 1 or 2 listings. Let's say you have 1 listing. What's the first thing you do? Do you either build a website or build an Airbnb listing?
Airbnb listing.
Okay. Tell us why.
It's the easiest way to get a booking. I mean, come on. How amazing is this? Literally, I could turn this room into an Airbnb listing and have a guest tomorrow. That is insane. The feedback loop that affords me as a potential vacation entrepreneur, to see what it's like to host somebody, to see what works, to see some validation. Oh, other people like this room too? Other people want to explore my version of Miami Beach? That validation that provides, or maybe the opposite, is so much more cost efficient than jumping to advanced marketing techniques. A website is down the line.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Take care.
My pleasure.